All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And good afternoon to people who are watching on the live stream. I'm Larry Madowo, an anchor correspondent at CNN, and I'm so excited to have this conversation. I will introduce the panel, first of all, from the extreme right, left. That is it. Yes, Paddy Padmanathan is Vice Chairman and Chief Executive Officer at ACWA Power in Saudi Arabia. Thank you for joining us here. And we have in the middle, Jenny Davis-Peccoud, partner, global partner, practice leader, sustainability and responsibility practice at Bain and Company. And here with me, closest, is Ambassador Majid Al Suwaidi, Director General of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP28, in the office of the Special Envoy for Climate Change of the United Emirates. Thank you all for being here with us. I want to start this conversation by picking up from what the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said this morning, and what stayed with me is his statement that every week we have a new climate horror story, and this is something that I can relate with. I live in Nairobi in Kenya, and you must be aware of the record drought that has been faced in the Horn of Africa, and more recently as well, I was in Nigeria covering record flooding, and regardless of where you come from in whatever part of the world, you know something similar that's been exacerbated by climate change. And it's very exciting that for the second time in a row, the Middle East is hosting a COP conference. This year we're going to the United Arab Emirates. It's called the COP of the Emirates, Ambassador. And the purpose of this briefing is to talk about the priorities of the United Arab Emirates in hosting COP28, but also to hear from some of the industry insights from Saudi Arabia and the research that Bain and Company has done specifically regarding the Middle East. And so that's where I want to start, Ambassador. When we talk about COP28 and what the UAE hopes to achieve here, my first question to you is to talk about your priorities as a company, as a country rather. And these COPs have now evolved from a small group of negotiators into a much bigger platform, right? And often you have tens of thousands of stakeholders, which can get a little unwieldy, to be completely honest. Where do you see the world's collective progress on the current state of achievement on our climate goals?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be with such great panelists. Of course, we are embarking on a long, tough year ahead of us, but we are very excited with what we can do this year. I was the lead climate change negotiator in Paris, and certainly there we agreed that we would have what was called the global stocktake, and at the COP in the Emirates, we will be holding that global stocktake. And the global stocktake, what is it? It's a report card. It will say, probably we all expect that we're off track for achieving the goals of Paris. And that means that we need to start to think about what are we going to do about it. And for that, it's very clear that we need to deliver real pragmatic solutions, practical outcomes that will get us back on track to achieving less than 1.5 degrees and the financial targets of 100 billion and plus. Because we know also that the gap the gaps are huge. How are we going to do that? We have to do that through ambitious action and mitigation. We need to have everybody coming forward with real concrete outcomes, actions that they're going to take to achieve our mitigation goals. We're also mandated to deliver a global goal on adaptation. In the past, the effects of climate change were something that was seen off in the future.
Right.
Today,
a distant future, far away.
Exactly. And today we see it with flooding, with hurricanes, with tropical storms, and we see that the poorest people in the world are the ones who are most impacted, and we need to address this today. And by the way, this makes sense for everybody. We need to look at food security. We need to look at water security. We need to look at how resilient we are. And that, of course, brings us to the loss and damage piece, which was one of the great outcomes from Sharm el-Sheikh, and we're working very closely with our Egyptian colleagues to see how we can progress that. We have to deliver that in the COP in the Emirates, and that speaks to the most vulnerable people in the world and the most vulnerable communities, the poorest. How can we be doing more to help them when it comes to climate change? All of that is linked to finance. And we really believe that this is the year where we have to get serious in looking at how do we improve how finance is getting to real projects on the ground, making a real difference. How can we be looking at reform of the international financial institutions? How can we be looking at reform of the MDBs? What can we be doing to mobilize finance more broadly? And that brings us to the point that you raised about how do we engage this huge growing community of business, civil society, NGOs, non-state actors who want to come and be present at COPs and want to contribute to the solutions. And we really see that as an opportunity. And the COP of the Emirates, everybody's welcome. We want everybody to come with their solutions, with their ideas, because we can't just have incremental change. We need to have step change. We need to have significant outcomes that are going to bridge this gap, because guess what? It's 2023 and 2030 is 7 years away.
Right.
So any decision that we're going to make, any policy decision, any investment decision, any project decision has to be made today to have an impact on changing our trajectories to reach our 2030 goals. And so that's our ambition, and we're here and excited at this year ahead.
You talk about engaging business, and I want to bring in Jenny here because nature-based solutions have been getting a lot of attention in the Middle East and North Africa region. But research from Bain and Company and the World Economic Forum argues that the region gets more bang for its buck to curb emissions through technology-based solutions, and there are lots of challenges there. But these technologies require significant funding. He was talking about funding a little earlier, so that they can scale, right? And are stakeholders in the region serious about committing funding for this transition?
Yeah, so firstly, look, it's not a surprise that different regions will find different decarbonization levers. If you look at Canada versus the Middle East, for example, and how much it would take to invest in, say, afforestation versus renewables, Canada is going to have different priorities than the Middle East. And actually, it's going to be more effective for the Middle East to be investing in renewables than it will be to be investing in afforestation. And that's what we mean by bigger bang for buck. Mm-hmm. Now, what are those kinds of technologies? Well, energy efficiency, renewables, hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, carbon capture and storage, as an example. Now, do they all require investment? Well, take energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is actually about saving money, saving power, saving energy. And so actually, what you find is those investments pay back very quickly. And so you can get quite a long way on some of those efforts, actually with a positive business case. And then if you think about how you're going to get a return on investment for the others, and of course it's an investment, but it is also a massive growth platform for the region, because just given where the Middle East is situated, it can actually be a provider of these kinds of technologies and energy, both to Europe as well as to Asia, including also with the Middle East. And so in terms of growth platform, it can be very exciting. Now, is there enough investment? Well, we were talking about this before. There's definitely not enough investment yet. So we've seen investment in renewables grow 1.5x. We know they need to grow 9x at least to get onto the 1.5 degree pathway, so there's a lot more that has to go. The Middle East has started investment in renewables. Major projects are coming online, but actually in terms of where the Middle East is now versus investments globally, it's still a small percentage, and it really needs to accelerate. I'm sure my co-panelist, Paddy, is going to talk a lot more about that. But we would expect to see investments in the Middle East flowing more to some of those technology-based solutions. That doesn't mean that nature-based solutions won't play a role. It will play a role in every region's decarbonization pathway, certainly things around water, for example, is acknowledging some of the challenges around biodiversity and desertification will be important for the region, but we'll expect the focus on technology, and it could be quite an attractive proposition.
All right, because of the attention of these subjects, matters like the energy transition and decarbonization have become a major topic even in the Middle East. And the Middle East is also, we had COP27 in Egypt, COP28 in the UAE. The Middle East is also the energy supplier for the world. So it sits at that intersection between energy supply and sustainability. Is it possible to achieve both while maintaining the Middle East as the energy supplier for the world, but also trying to maintaining that energy supply for the world and ensuring a sustainable transition? Do you think it's possible? And I'm sure you will say yes, but explain why.
Yeah, well, no, I'm going to shock you and say no.
Oh.
Yes, absolutely, and for a very straightforward reason, because there's so much of technology that is available to us today. Middle East has shown that it has got the capacity and capability and the financing capacity to deploy at scale the assets that has provided energy security to the world to date. Okay, so now what we will be doing, what we are doing in that part of the world is using all of that capability and the steady stream of new technology that is flowing in to continue to reduce the carbon footprint of the fossil fuels that we are extracting and that we absolutely have to continue to supply to the world while we implement the transition, but at the same time start investing in the transition to rebalance our own fuel mix for domestic consumption as we go forward inside the country. What you are seeing today, and I'm privileged to be leading a company that's very much in the forefront, ACWA Power, very much in the forefront of delivering renewable energy, desalination, as well as now green hydrogen at scale. We are involved with very large, significant sort of investment. So even though Middle East is coming sort of late to the party in terms of starting to involve and implement big renewable investments, when we have started, we're doing it at scale. So the projects we are doing, I mean, the rest of the world started, okay, at that stage the technology was there, at that state, 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts, $50 million investments, $200 million investments. We have gone straight from day one into 1 billion, 5 billion. We've just now gone into construction on an 8.5 billion green hydrogen project. Renewable energy projects that we do in our part of the world these days are multi-billion-dollar projects. In order to achieve that target, of course, we need to start delivering projects of $30, $40 billion scale, and that is where we are going, and that's where we will get to. But what Middle East can continue to do and is committed to continue to do, because I see the footprints now being established, not only continue to keep reducing the carbon content of carbon footprint and the carbon content of the oil and gas extracted and put into the market, take more renewables for its own energy consumption at a phenomenally fast pace, but also developed renewable energy capacity in countries like United Arab Emirates and in Saudi Arabia, to now start exporting renewable energy, electrons and molecules to other parts of the world. So there are already feasibility studies that have started to look at a molecule pipeline into Europe, cross-border power lines, transocean power lines into India, into Europe from this part of the world and into Africa, and build capacity and competency in these countries to go and co-invest in other parts of the world. So companies like Mazda in United Arab Emirates, the company that I lead, ACWA Power, we are investing in 14, 15 countries around the world in expanding renewable energy capacity. So Middle East will play a very dominant role in this energy transition. And it will do it because it must, it recognizes its responsibility, but also because it's a compelling value proposition. This transition, there's a lot of discussion around, it's all going to be costly, it is the biggest economic opportunity that the world has ever seen. We've gone through transitions in the past. Each transition, there are winners and losers. Those who don't rush in will be the losers, but the scale of opportunity is so big and the rewards will be so big. Everybody is now have to jump in and get on with it.
And that's a fascinating point you raised, that if it's the biggest economic opportunity the world has ever seen, why are we so seriously off track? It seems like an easy case to make to anybody who looks at a P&L, like, hey, this is actually a good thing for you. Somebody like you should automatically get it.
Surprisingly, I mean, we're humans, right? So the biggest reason is the disbelief, okay? So because, and I think there is a problem, because renewable energy costs have come down so fast,
right?
There is this belief. I mean, can it be done in my country at that price? No.
It's not possible.
It can be. Just before COVID pandemic arrived, in Ethiopia, I'm not singling out Ethiopia, that tender was in Ethiopia. We were able to deliver photovoltaic energy completely on a commercial basis, no subsidies of any kind. 2.4 cents, $24 a megawatt hour, 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. Everybody was shocked. It can be done. Okay, and by the way, I think talking on the financing side, there's a lot of discussion around financing, and there is an enormous amount of money that is looking for the right projects. They will come into the developing parts of the world, no problem. The challenge today for us is to understand, I think the risk is getting inappropriately priced. We are thinking energy, which was and which is still at about $120 a megawatt hour on average. We are moving into a paradigm of energy being $30 to $40 per megawatt hour. So the risks are very different. At 120 megawatt dollars an hour, there isn't a hell of a lot I can do with that energy. I can just use it minimally for my basic needs, just about pray, I can pay the bills. At $30 to $40, I can invest and multiply. I can use that energy to do things, economically valuable things. Economies can grow and multiply because energy goes into everything we do. So I think there is, as we go forward within the next few years, we need to come to terms with thinking about how understanding that risk shift and starting to price it appropriately, which is what is going to be needed in order to multiply the scale of investments that will come into this transition.
Ambassador, you mentioned at the beginning in your opening remarks that we're off track. We're not on track to achieve the Paris targets. And I think when we hear the report from the global stock take process, which will be reported at COP28, it will show the same thing. So what is your magic trick that you're going to be pulling out when we all come to Dubai to try and get us back on track, to make sure that we get this radical action that is so badly needed to get us there?
Well, hopefully we won't need magic. We just need some hard work. Mm-hmm. And look, we're a custodian of a process. And we tend to think of COPs as these events that happen at the end of the year, but in fact it's a process.
Right.
It's a process that's been going on for a long time, and at each COP we build on the other. We have great outcomes in Glasgow, great outcomes in Sharm el-Sheikh. What we're saying is, in the COP at the Emirates, we need to take like huge leaps forward because we need to get back on track to achieving these things. Our job today is to convene that process, to make sure we have an open and inclusive process that's transparent, have those conversations, get the right people in the rooms to come forward with real solutions, try to drive that ambition from countries and from the private sector. And I think if we can bring these two worlds together of the negotiations and the government negotiations and the private sector, civil society and the non-state actors, and we can get these parties together, I think that we can deliver really big results. And by the way, this is what we are really good at in the UAE. Mm-hmm. We've always been very good at bringing government and the private sector together to deliver, build big projects, and that's definitely what we're going to do here. And I think that we will, as long as we stay focused and we keep working hard at this, we can definitely come with some really, really great results at the end of the year.
All right. I wanted to pick up, are there questions in the audience? I will get to them in a second, just after we discuss this tiny matter of the financing shortfall that we still badly need. And you had started to mention that we need all these technological solutions, but we don't have the money for it. So I wonder, Jenny, how do we get there? Do you have any innovative ideas, things you've seen in MENA that are a model for how this could scale?
Okay, so there's a number of sources of financing and how they all come together. I mean, you mentioned some of the more traditional, the MDBs, et cetera. There is a question around a price on carbon, and is that something that we're going to bring forward? Obviously in Europe that already exists. Is that going to be something that comes in other regions or more globally? Carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets is something which is also being touted as a means of bringing financing into the sector. We have again been looking at the voluntary carbon markets. There are a lot of things that are in the way of that market developing as fast as it needs to. The standards aren't clear. guidance around how you can use, for example, some of the offsets in your path to net zero need to be clarified, so those companies that should be investing in the voluntary carbon market actually can have the confidence to go in early, instead of saying, oh, we can only use offsets at the end of the process, kind of the tail emissions, and so let's think about that in 2040. No, let's start thinking about that now, and how can we actually start bringing that forward. So I think there will need to be a whole series of solutions, some of them from the private sector, quite a lot from the public sector as well, and I'm sure that's going to be a healthy part of the discussions at COP28.
All right, Paddy, jump in here.
Yeah, no, I'm going to jump in on just on the COP process itself. So a couple of things. One, don't forget, it is United Arab Emirates. So they united themselves, by the way. So they do know how to negotiate. However,
okay, that's a promising thing.
however, I think coming at it from the private sector, certainly speaking for myself as a private sector agent, we need to move beyond negotiation now. Huh? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are bits to negotiate, but come on, guys, we need to act, we need to deliver. Mm-hmm. And I am very encouraged by the start of this process of 28, where you are inviting everyone to come in. Nobody is going to be barred. Though everyone who wants, that's what I've heard, everyone who wants to contribute constructively should be allowed to participate, because this is then a fantastic convening platform. We are never going to achieve what we need to achieve by just acting individually. It's through collaboration, it is through partnerships, and it is through, and collaboration, partnerships are developed through trust, and that is by meeting people, talking to people, arguing with people, fighting with people, and understanding what's and all of each other. So that's what this opportunity should be used for, and I really am looking forward to a different kind of process than the ones that we have seen in the recent past.
All right, this is a good place to put a pause and take any questions from the audience before we come back to wrap up. Please introduce yourself and go ahead with your question.
Thank you. My name is Tetsuji Ija from Kyodo News based in Tokyo. So I know that very little achievement for the mitigation at COP27, and we cannot repeat the failure on COP28. So my question to Ambassador is, what kind of outcome in your mind to achieve more high levels of ambition on mitigation? Is a new target or new document, new statement, or just only a COP decision, cover decision like COP27? What kind of outcome in your mind?
Do you accept the premise of the question that there was very little achievement at COP27?
Well, I think that COP28...
That's why he's an ambassador. Very diplomatic.
Yeah. Well, look, every COP is incremental, right? And every COP is subject to what the parties want to deliver. And our Egyptian colleagues, I think, delivered a fantastic COP. I think that they definitely delivered an amazing outcome when it came to the loss and damage fund that we have to action now. I think that they made progress across the board. COP28 is a milestone COP. It's a COP where we're delivering this global stocktake. And that means that we have to deliver a balanced outcome across all of the items that I mentioned: mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and finance. We have to have outcomes. We are doing this stocktake to say, since Paris, where have we got to? Are we on track? If we know that that's not on track, then what are we going to do to get back on track? And inevitably, that means that we have to take serious mitigation steps to achieve the goal of keeping temperatures under 1.5 degrees. We also need to have a global goal on adaptation. We need to have activate the loss and damage fund, and we need to have reform of finance. We have made pledges to deliver funds to address climate change, and that the fact of the matter is that finance just hasn't gotten deployed. So we need to ask ourselves, why hasn't it been deployed? We need to ask ourselves, why hasn't mitigation action happened in the way that we need to do? And we, as COP president, I come back to this point, are custodians of a process. We do not prejudge what that outcome should be. The parties have to tell us, and this year we will have a process that is open, that convenes those parties, And they will decide from November 30th to the 12th of December, they will decide what that outcome looks like. And our job is to provide the platform for that discussion.
All right, thank you. Do you have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jessica from Eco-Business in Singapore. I liked what Ambassador said about how we're custodians of this process, but you would have heard that there was huge backlash about the COP28 process because of the appointments of the Abu Dhabi IO chief as the COP28 president. And people are saying, well, NGO groups, that there's a clear conflict of interest. And I wondered, what your perspective was on that.
Well, I think that our panelists are better placed to answer that, but I'm happy to answer that. Look, we are custodians of the process. Our COP president is a person with 20 years experience. People who look at his CV and who know him know that he has delivered on huge transition to renewable energy in the UAE. Masdar, which was mentioned already, is the largest renewable energy provider globally. He has been instrumental in our country's progress and transition, and our country today has diversified our economy from oil and gas to 70% non-oil and gas. By the way, we haven't come to this lately. Our founding father, Sheikh Zayed, was one of the first people to have a zero flaring policy in the UAE. Today we have 3 of the largest, lowest cost solar plants. We have policies in place for reducing energy bills and energy efficiency. We've been walking the talk for a long time, and Dr. Sultan has been at the heart of that. But moreover, the COP presidency is a team. And not many people are talking about the fact that we have a high-level champion, Her Excellency Razana Mbarak, a woman who's president of the IUCN, who's going to bring in nature-based solutions and talk about the success that we had at COP15 and how we compare that with what we do with COP28. At COP28, and then also a youth champion. We've appointed a youth champion in Her Excellency Shem Al-Mazrou'i, who is also going to see how we can bring youth into the process. I'm very confident that people will see that we are going to deliver a process that's open, inclusive, and that everybody will be involved. And I think that our COP president is perfectly placed given his history. He understands government, he understands the private sector. He has delivered projects. He's the first CEO COP president. We've never had a CEO COP president before. He's action-oriented, he's pragmatic, he's solutions-based. That makes my job really difficult because he's constantly asking me, what are the real things that we are going to deliver and achieve? And he's laser-focused on making sure that we deliver outcomes that get us back on track for achieving the goals of Paris. And by the way, that's the goal that we all should be focused on when it comes to these climate conferences. How do we make sure that we achieve the temperature goals of less than 1.5 degrees and get the finance out the door to deliver those projects? And how can we do it fast? How can we scale it up? And how can we speed it up? And I think that our team, our UAE team, is well placed to do that.
Paddy, you want to jump in? Because there's a huge amount of controversy regarding the appointment of the COP president.
Yeah, look, I don't want to add to the controversy. I just want to point out the obvious. So, Dr. Sultan I know very well simply because he was my fierce competitor in Masdar and Aqua Power as we were competing for renewable energy tenders around the world. Having said that, we've got a huge amount of respect for each other. So he has a massive history in implementing renewable energy at scale and accelerating that. So Abu Dhabi went out and did that for itself and invested around the world long time ago. And he was the guy who was leading that charge. A few years, even before last week, was it last week when the announcement was there? A few years ago when he was made CEO of ADNOC, what do you think I thought? It was a very clear signal to me that his boss wanted him to go clean up ADNOC. To put it bluntly, to decarbonize, to help accelerate the decarbonization of that oil and gas company. So that was what he was must have been charged with. Otherwise, why did he go in there? And now, very logical. And the other point, even before this question was asked, what I said to you, I think it's extremely important that as we go forward, we include everybody. We include all the oil and gas companies who have got massive capacity and capability.
And you don't see the potential conflict of interest there?
Absolutely not, because they are recognizing that they need to transform, and many of them are at it. So there is no conflict. And I think this formalizes that collaboration.
Right. We have to bring it to a close, so I'm going to give you the final word really quickly, Jenny, on this or anything we've talked about, and just trying to, as we build that momentum toward COP28.
I would say that bringing together, as you said, each of the different pieces of the global society and economy, so the government, the businesses, the youth, the civil society, I think that is what's going to be most important. I love what you just said about integrating biodiversity into this. Those two things are not the same, decarbonization and nature positive, but they're closely related, and so having that in there as well. And what's most welcome is this focus on action and driving to concrete practical outcomes to get the barriers out of the way, what's standing in, what's preventing progress, and how can we break through. And that's the kind of pragmatism that it's great to see both at the helm as well as then coming in through the process and COP28 in November and December.
And Ambassador Al Suwaidi, can you just confirm that nobody will be barred? Everybody will be welcome at the table.
Everybody's welcomed at COP28, and we encourage you to come. Our only ask is that you come with solutions and real actions. That's what we want our COP to be about, is about solutions, actions, real things that will get us back on track to achieving the goals of Paris, because that is our laser focus at the moment.
Give a big thank you to my panel, Jenny Davis-Peccoud, Paddy Padmanathan, and Majid Al Suwaidi. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And thank you for watching.